No one cares about Monica McDougal. Monica says things like this to bring a...
There is little dispute that Clark's popularity has been extraordinary. Her games have drawn significant crowds, television audiences have climbed during her appearances, and endorsement opportunities have followed. In modern sports economics, those indicators are widely seen as measures of star power. When a player's presence correlates with rising attention and revenue, analysts and executives alike take notice. That context is part of why discussions about her influence have become so intense. Critics of McNutt argue that minimizing such visible momentum risks overlooking clear evidence. They point to merchandise demand, ticket sales, and media coverage as signs that Clark's impact extends beyond the court. From their perspective, acknowledging those factors isn't hype, it's simply recognizing market reality. On the other hand, some commentators believe it's still important to separate popularity from long-term legacy. They argue that while early success and attention are impressive, true historical impact can only be measured over time. That viewpoint suggests caution in declaring any player transformational too quickly. The clash between those perspectives has fueled debate. One side sees skepticism as unfair dismissal, the other sees unquestioned praise as premature. McNutt's remarks landed directly in the middle of that divide, which helps explain why they sparked such strong reactions and why the discussion continues expanding rather than fading away.
The thing that I cannot deny is the amount of little girls that were showing up to follow her.
Why her?
Well, but she was a white girl from the middle of America.
There's a method to this madness. When given a chance to talk about Caitlin Clark, they're always going to racialize it and try to demonize Caitlin Clark's fan base.
Yet, instead of appreciating Clark for leading the WNBA out of the abyss and into the mainstream conversation, mean girls and race clowns met her with resistance. Because Caitlin Clark's white, that's why little girls have gravitated towards her. I think what she's saying is ridiculous, and to tie it to little girls, you're going as low as humanly possible.
As a prominent voice covering professional basketball, McNutt has spent years building a reputation as a knowledgeable and articulate analyst. Her commentary has appeared across major broadcasts, studio panels, and digital segments, giving her a platform that reaches millions of viewers. Because of that visibility, her opinions carry weight, and when she questions a player's impact, people tend to pay attention. Recently, some of those questions focused on Clark's influence on the WNBA, particularly regarding how much credit she deserves for surging attention around the sport. Supporters of Clark argue that her record-setting performances, headline-grabbing games, and ability to draw new audiences speak for themselves. They see statistical milestones, sold-out arenas, and rising ratings as evidence that her presence has energized the league. From their perspective, any attempt to downplay that impact feels disconnected from observable trends. McNutt's defenders counter that analysts are supposed to question narratives, not simply echo them. They say examining hype is part of responsible commentary, especially when a player receives extraordinary attention early in her career. In their view, skepticism doesn't equal hostility, it reflects professional analysis. The disagreement illustrates how the same remarks can be interpreted in completely different ways depending on the listener's expectations. Some hear thoughtful critique, while others hear unfair dismissal. That divide is precisely what has turned routine commentary into a widely debated topic.
Black players have decided, hey, we're going to hate on Caitlin Clark constantly to elevate ourselves, but also trigger her fans so that they'll keep coming to games and rooting for her, and it's going to elevate the...
What started as a debate over basketball analysis has now evolved into what many describe as a media firestorm. The moment McNutt's remarks were interpreted as downplaying Clark's influence, discussion spread rapidly across platforms, shows, and commentary panels. Fans dissected her wording, analysts evaluated her arguments, and former players weighed in with their own perspectives. Each new voice added another layer to the conversation, intensifying its reach. Critics claim the evidence contradicts her stance, pointing to performance statistics, attendance trends, and broadcast numbers as proof of Clark's impact. Supporters of McNutt counter that statistics can be interpreted in different ways and that skepticism remains a legitimate part of analysis. This clash of interpretations has turned a single viewpoint into an ongoing public debate. Media controversies often follow this trajectory. A statement sparks reaction, reaction invites analysis, and analysis fuels further reaction. The cycle can continue long after the original comment, especially when both sides remain firmly convinced they are right. For McNutt, the discussion has become less about one specific remark and more about her overall narrative. Viewers are now examining her past commentary to see whether it aligns with or contradicts her recent statements, turning her entire body of work into part of the conversation.
Have all these fans come to see Caitlin, and all the little suburban white girls have hopped on board because Caitlin Clark, she resonates with them more so than the angry black lesbians who dominate the WNBA.
Another layer of controversy emerged when McNutt criticized what she described as disproportionate media focus on Clark compared to other players. She suggested that coverage sometimes centers so heavily on one star that it risks overshadowing equally talented athletes across the league. In principle, that argument reflects a long-standing conversation in sports journalism about balance and representation. Many analysts over the years have warned that excessive spotlight on a single figure can distort public perception of a team sport. However, critics say the issue wasn't the argument itself but how it was delivered. They believe the tone of certain remarks implied that Clark's rise was driven more by hype than performance. Once that interpretation spread, fans began revisiting previous clips and compiling them as evidence of a pattern. In the digital era, archived footage is only a search away, making it easy for audiences to analyze a commentator's history in detail. Had those remarks been isolated, they might have passed without much reaction. Instead, viewers who already sensed a pattern treated them as confirmation of their suspicions. That's when the discussion shifted from disagreement to backlash. The tipping point, according to many observers, came when critics felt the commentary crossed from evaluating play into questioning legitimacy. Whether that perception was accurate or exaggerated is still debated, but once audiences concluded a line had been crossed, the response intensified dramatically.
It's easier for a 5'7" girl to relate to a 6' girl than it is a 6'5" woman who's angry and whose best friend is some transgender man that thinks he's a woman and who walks around preaching to little white girls, you got a privilege and you don't have to work as hard as me and you don't have to do as much as me, because they're not willing to have the true discussion about why Caitlin Clark is so.
What initially seemed like standard basketball criticism soon intensified into a situation that many observers now describe as a full-scale controversy. At first, the remarks blended into the usual cycle of televised debate, where analysts routinely challenge players' performances and question narratives. But over time, viewers began noticing a pattern, and that pattern changed how the commentary was received. Instead of hearing isolated critiques, some audiences felt they were witnessing a consistent tone that singled out one player more than others. As attention grew, the reaction became impossible to ignore. Fans started responding in large numbers, dissecting clips, and sharing their interpretations online. Social platforms amplified the discussion, allowing short excerpts of commentary to circulate far beyond their original broadcast context. Once that happened, the conversation expanded from basketball analysis into a broader debate about fairness, bias, and media responsibility. Television networks and producers are always aware of public sentiment, especially when a personality they feature becomes a trending topic. Industry insiders know that perception can influence ratings, advertiser comfort, and brand image. That doesn't automatically mean consequences follow, but it does mean attention shifts quickly behind the scenes. For McNutt, the discussion is no longer limited to whether her basketball opinions were accurate. Instead, it has evolved into a larger question about credibility, how viewers interpret her tone, whether they see her as objective, and how her commentary fits into the broader landscape of sports media analysis today.
Clark is relatable and popular, and people want to see her play because she's exciting as heck to watch and because she's not filled with anger. People are attracted to.
Notably, the response didn't come only from devoted fans. Some sports journalists, commentators, and former players also weighed in, offering their own perspectives on the situation. A few expressed surprise at the intensity of McNutt's critiques, saying they felt unusually pointed compared to typical analyst remarks. Others defended her, arguing that challenging popular narratives is part of a commentator's job and should not automatically be interpreted as hostility. When industry voices join a public debate, it often signals that the issue has moved beyond casual fan discussion into professional territory. Analysts understand how easily commentary can be misinterpreted, especially when short clips circulate without full context. Several pointed out that television segments are often edited for time, which can make statements sound sharper than intended. Still, the fact that fellow media figures felt compelled to address the situation showed how widely it had spread. Conversations about McNutt's remarks began appearing not only in fan spaces but also in industry circles where reputations are closely watched. That level of attention can be both positive and risky. On one hand, it increases visibility. On the other, it places every word under a microscope. For a public analyst, that kind of scrutiny can shape how future commentary is received, regardless of whether the original controversy was justified.
Monica has figured out a way to make the WNBA relevant and profitable long term. The lady from the BBC, she seems to be asking Monica McDougall how the WNBA can maintain their momentum from last season. There's an easy answer to that question. More than likely, they can't.
Two things. I think it has to show up in our storytelling, and it has to be encouraged by our families.
Yeah.
To me, right? And so covering the WNBA this past season, Caitlin Clark's rookie year, for all of the conversation that surrounded her, some which was fair and some which wasn't, the one thing that I cannot deny is the amount of little girls that were showing up to follow her. Little girls with their parents and the fervor and the energy there.
Why her?
Same thing.
Why her?
Well, I was just about to say same thing for Angel Reese when I had a chance to cover their games. But I think Caitlin represented, and again, some of this to me probably is not fair to her because it was not anything that she said or was truly based on her personality, but she was a white girl from the middle of America. And so she represented a whole lot to a lot of people, whether that is truly what she prescribed to or not. We can all say she is a dynamic basketball player and a force both on the court and the marketing sense. But I do think same thing with folks that may have fallen in love with Angel Reese that she may or may not have agreed with everything they had to say either. We attach our fandom to these icons for all types of reasons.
Where are these Angel Reese fans? When I see Chicago Bravado games on TV, the only things I see are missed layups and empty.
As discussion intensified, questions about McNutt's credibility started surfacing more frequently. Some viewers began asking whether her analysis remained fully objective or whether her perspective on Clark had become influenced by personal skepticism. In sports media, credibility is one of the most valuable assets an analyst possesses, because audiences rely on commentators to interpret games with fairness and expertise. Social media amplified those concerns. Posts calling for networks to reconsider her role circulated widely, while others urged patience and defended her professionalism. This split reaction highlighted how divided public opinion had become. To some, she was a commentator unfairly targeted for expressing an opinion. To others, she represented an example of analysis crossing into perceived bias. Sponsors and broadcasters typically monitor public sentiment closely, though they rarely respond publicly unless controversy escalates dramatically. Even so, the mere suggestion that such pressure could arise shows how seriously audiences take the issue. In reality, reputations in media are rarely defined by a single moment. They evolve over time through consistent performance and audience trust. Still, when scrutiny intensifies, every appearance and statement becomes more significant. For McNutt, the current wave of attention has placed her commentary under a spotlight brighter than any she has faced before.
Was a white girl from the middle of America.
ESPN and claimed that Monica McNutt is an NBA analyst. Obviously, Monica never played in the NBA. Monica wasn't even good enough to play in the WNBA. Maybe that's why Monica seems to be jealous of Caitlin.
Monica McNutt has suddenly found herself at the center of a storm that many observers say could seriously affect her professional reputation, and according to critics, it all traces back to her repeated public commentary about Caitlin Clark. What might once have sounded like routine sports analysis has now been interpreted by some viewers as unusually sharp criticism, and that shift in perception has sparked intense debate. In modern sports media, tone matters almost as much as content, and audiences today scrutinize analysts closely, replaying clips, dissecting phrasing, and comparing past statements for consistency. That environment can turn even a minor remark into a viral flashpoint overnight. Supporters of McNutt argue she has always been known for direct opinions and honest evaluations, traits that helped her build credibility in a crowded media landscape. Critics, however, believe her recent remarks crossed from analysis into territory that felt personal or dismissive. Whether that interpretation is fair or exaggerated depends largely on perspective, but what cannot be denied is the reaction. Conversations about her commentary are spreading rapidly across fan communities, sports forums, and discussion panels. Moments like this highlight how quickly narratives can change in the public eye. One week, a commentator is praised for bold takes, the next, those same qualities are framed as controversial. For McNutt, the situation has become a defining test of perception, influence, and how far strong opinions can travel before they trigger consequences she may not have anticipated when she first voiced them.